What is a black hole? Here we see the Ollama CLI answering that question. It appears to answer the question almost instantaneously. Now let's call the API on the same question. I'll fast forward here because waiting sucks, but you can see the timing of this on the screen. It feels a lot slower, but it's not. It's answering in the exact same amount of time, give or take some minimally small period. So what's happening here? If you had questions about things like this in the past, be sure to like this video and subscribe to this channel. I put out all sorts of videos about large language models and Ollama every week. Plus, I'm also putting out an entire course on Ollama on this channel for free. Every video in the course is coming out on Tuesday, so subscribe if you want to see more. Before we look at the details of this problem, I'm running Ollama Serve with the Ollama Keep Alive set to 0, which means nothing stays in memory, and it always has to reload the model. You would probably never want to actually do this in real life, but it ensures all my tests look at the exact same procedure. Well, there are two main reasons it appears to be faster with the CLI. First is what happens when the CLI loads, and the other is how they use streaming. Let's start with the first. When you run Ollama run Mistral Nemo, Ollama loads Mistral Nemo into memory. You aren't dropped into the REPL or interactive environment until after the model is fully loaded into memory and ready to go. Depending on the platform and the size of the model, loading a model into memory can be quick or slow. I have an Apple Silicon Mac, which does this very quickly. So an 8 billion parameter model usually takes half a second to load into memory. I've seen that GPUs from different manufacturers can take much longer to load. So if it takes a few seconds to load a model, it can feel like Ollama is taking longer with the API because you don't get dropped into the REPL until that part is done. And if you start your mental timing when you press enter on your question, then you're artificially cutting out a large part of the process. But there's also something else that affects things. Here we are in the CLI again. We ask a question and we see the first word appear really quickly. We start reading the answer, and we don't really pay attention to when it's done because we're focused on reading the answer. But depending on how you call the API, we don't get the first word until the entire generation is complete. And so it feels like it's taking longer. Instead of using the JS or Python libraries, let's use an API client like Postman. Insomnia or Paw or Bingo or any of the other clients probably do the same thing. We enter the URL and the body and press send, and we wait for a while, just like when using JS. Okay, there are two things going on here. First, both the JS and Python libraries default to not using streaming. The reason for this is that dealing with the output is just easier for a newer developer. But the RESTful API uses streaming. But most of the API clients like Postman don't support streaming, so they return all the objects all at once when everything's done. To see what really happens, we need to use curl. So I'll type in the command, and then we'll see it start to answer right away. But it's pretty jumbled up. Let's go back to using the API. Here's the example I used before, but if I add stream as true, then deal with streaming output by processing each of the chunks as I get them, then I get something very different. As each token is generated, its output shows up just like it does in the CLI. So this shows that the API performs just like the CLI. This is a pretty common question in the Discord, and hopefully now it makes some sense why it seems like the API is slower than the CLI, even though it completely is not. What do you think? Have you run into this issue? Does it make more sense now? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching. Goodbye.